Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Varun Shankar from the Washington Post is with us now to talk about his piece on Alex Sarr. And Varun, you start with this just really great anecdote of the Summer League game and I say like the Summer League game with Alex Sarr, and everyone immediately knows what we're talking about, right? He goes 0-15 from the field. Everyone's like, he's the characters you read about of the basketball internet for the next week because of it. But it really turns into this kind of exemplary moment of who Alex Sarr is and probably why Will Dawkins and Michael Winger and Brian Keefe were so high on him. So why did you choose to start there, and what did you learn about that night as you were reporting this piece, and how it really does in some ways define, and really how Alex rebounds from that, define Alex Sarr?
Yeah, with Sarr, it's everyone's first introduction to what he's like as a player. He, played in Perth, overseas in Australia. Not a lot of people are watching the games like they would a college player. And he comes in, and his third game of Summer League is just a disaster, right? It's 0-15. He plays well other than the shooting, but still shot 0-15. And online, it's just this hailstorm of criticism he's receiving. Everyone is like, throwing out the buzzword already, right? And he's 19 years old. When I was 19, that might have crushed me. But what you quickly learn about Alex is he's got this. When we usually talk about confident people, we talk about very self-assured, sometimes almost bordering on brash or arrogant. But with Sarr, it's this very laid back, quiet, reserved confidence. And the way that General Manager Will Dawkins put it to me was, he has a belief that if he works hard enough, he can turn his weaknesses into strengths. And so that night of the game, after the game, he is some level of upset about it. Like, there is no denying it, but he's not losing it. He's not unnerved. He comes out, he's frustrated. He texts his trainer and he's like, hey, I want to get some shots up. They'd already been thinking about doing a workout, but he was like, no, we absolutely have to do this. They had dinner plans. They canceled dinner plans. It's time to work. They get in the gym, and it's not. One thing that stood out to me was sometimes you hear about these kinds of workouts and it feels like they're going to be these 3 hours of like hyper intense, like they're killing themselves basically just to get a good get a good workout and get the feel of the game. It wasn't like that with Sarr. It was very clinical. He goes step by step, and he and his trainer took 343 shots, and not a single one of them was outside 17 feet, and every single one was with the idea of, let's work on your base. Let's make sure you have a good base. It's this very targeted approach to improvement.
Yeah, I found that as someone who, by the way, does fitness coaching and things like that. Like, my coaching brain was like, yeah, I love that, because sometimes, especially when you're making adjustments on anything, and this could be in like sport specific or something more on the athletic movement side of it. Like, if you're making those adjustments, the result is not going to be perfect. Like, if a sprinter is tweaking their running form, they're probably not going to go as fast as they would if they just ran like they've always run, because they've gotten to that level where they're an elite sprinter. But in the long term, it's worth it. And I feel like another thing you captured in the story that I'd love for you to talk about a little bit is how that concept, the ability for Sarr to manage mentally the misses like he did in that workout, where you described like they would basically ignore whether the ball went in or not, and he told the trainer yes or no based on how it felt. How that also translates to what Will and Brian Keefe have done with his 3-point shooting in 2024-25.
Yeah, there's not a lot of evidence that Sarr has been a good 3-point shooter up to this point in his career. I think he shot like under 30% in Australia. He's shooting like low 30%, if that, right now with the Wizards. But he's taking a lot of shots, and the idea basically is he's going to be a good shooter one day because of these reps. That's the Wizards' belief, at least. But that subjects him to missing shot after shot. But the thing with Sarr is those don't affect him. Missing the previous shot doesn't make him less inclined to take the current one. He understands. He's able to see the big picture and see the development trajectory and see how short-term failure can impact long-term success.
Varun Shankar with us from the Washington Post here on the Hoffman Show for Not My Beat today. Where does that come from him? Because you talked to his parents for this story. I mean, there's probably some element of like a French laissez-faire, something in there. Like culturally, it's just a different way to come up through the basketball ranks than the American AAU system, where if you're not scoring 60, like you're not going to get the college letters and all that kind of stuff. Like, from parents to the international pathway that he took to where he grew up, like where do you think that ability to process that short-term failure and keep an eye on a longer-term success and not be flustered by it comes from?
It started a little more recently, according to Sarr. Like he said that it started maybe like 2 or so years ago when he started at OTE in Atlanta. I think part of it is also just the path he took. Like this is a guy who left home at 14 to go play at the Real Madrid cadet team, and he didn't know Spanish or English when he went there. And now, if you watch the post-game press conference for when the team went to Mexico City, like he's speaking fluent Spanish, and he's had to deal with being the newcomer multiple times. And I think that having to not reinvent himself, but figure out who he is and apply that to a new situation, he's had to do that so many times at this point and had to do it from such a young age that it's taught him who he is in a way.
When you talk to Will for this, like I would wonder, I don't know if he would not answer the question, hey, if you had the number 1 pick and it was Sarr or Sarr, like would you have gone Sarr, whatever. But what is it about Sarr that really stood out? Because I think, they were more excited about this draft than a lot of other teams. So what is it about Sarr specifically as the first pick that they got in this draft that Will was super excited about?
His athletic profile is something that they really like. I mean, Sarr is a pretty one-of-one athlete at 7 foot, the way he can move, the fluidity with which he moves. I think this mental makeup also really encouraged them, though, because they understood that this is I don't want to say project because he's already been a pretty good player, but he's a project, right? For him to reach the ceiling that you'd like a number 2 pick to reach, there is a lot of development that still needs to go. And I think that they saw him with this, they saw him with the other 2 rookies as well, but I think this is especially true with Sarr. They saw an ability to weather the storm that comes with developing. I mean, development's like an ugly process, right? Like it can be very painful. You have to be exposed to your weaknesses. You have to confront them, and then you have to start doing the work to improve them, and not in any way in the middle of that process, get beaten down by having to be exposed to these weaknesses. And Brian Keefe talks about it all the time, the Wizards are putting their young players through the fire of the NBA. Sarr has had to be exposed to so many different types of players, so many different types of schemes, so many different roles and situations, and he's had to mess up again and again and identify those failures and work through them. And the thing with him is he's able to move on to the next play in a way that I think some players struggle with.
That's interesting too, because development is an ugly process, and it often can happen behind the scenes. I mean, there are definitely guys in the league that go to maybe better teams that they get drafted. They're the 17th overall pick just outside the lottery. You don't hear from them for 2 years. And then by year 3, you're like, oh, when did that guy become like a 15-point per game scorer? Look at him go. And barely played. And he was just working hard behind the scenes, maybe up and down in the G League. You just literally don't hear. These guys are starting every single night. What did you did that come up in that process of the public nature of them having to go through this ugly process with either Sarr, his parents, Olivier, his brother, who you also interviewed, BK, Dawkins? Did they talk about the risk involved with that, or whether they even see that as a risk?
I don't think they really see it as a risk. I think they make these draft picks with the knowledge that we're going to be putting these players through some potentially difficult circumstances. And they try to not only find players who they think can go through that, but also prepare them as best as possible. I think there is a pretty intentional focus on telling the young guys, it's a long-term thing. You're going to struggle. That's okay. That's how it works. And I think the players also come in with some expectation of listen, I'm 19. I'm going to be playing for a while, against fully grown men who have done this for a while. So you try and set the expectations and hope that you're able to push through because of them.
How much of that expectation setting is coming from front office? Because the hard part about that, right, is you want to make sure you set expectations. This is going to be hard. We're probably going to lose a lot. But you also don't want to put an artificial cap on guys. You don't want to say, hey, we're going to lose a lot, and then all of a sudden they're good, and everyone's like, hey man, I thought we were supposed to lose. Like, why are you holding us back? So how much collaboration, how much of those discussions are happening between, and how much do they even talk about, I would say, winning and losing around the Wizards organization, whether it's Will, whether it's Brian, whether it's some of the vets on the team, like that, the idea of like, yeah, we're keeping score every night. There's a record. It's not very good. But also making sure that you don't artificially cap these guys and say like, oh, hey, don't worry about that. We're not good enough for that right now.
I don't think it's necessarily that they're saying like we're not good enough right now. It's more just letting the young guys know that growing pains are part of growth, essentially. And they really do try to prepare them for it. It is not going to be easy, and you may not see the results immediately that you need. And there's a mental toughness that they're trying to bring in players with that mental toughness, but also remind them, instill it, encourage it. They talk about winning and losing a lot. Like the veterans, especially the coaching staff, especially like you can like look at Brian Keefe on the sideline during a Wizards game if you get the chance. Like he is living and dying with every basket, and
it's a lot of dying this year. Poor Brian.
he like. These are competitive people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like no one is coming into the locker room afterward happy about the loss. But they also do understand where the team is in the trajectory and what they're trying to achieve.
Varun Shankar from the Washington Post with us here on the Hoffman Show for Not My Beat today. So getting back more specifically to Sarr for a second, and then I just kind of want to do a halfway point check-in to round out our visit here. But when you talk about Sarr specifically, you have some numbers in the piece of some areas of improvement, but you watch him every single night. You watched every single minute of the season. Like, where is he compared to maybe where you thought he would be when you kind of saw him for the first time, whether it was that summer league game or the beginning of the regular season? And like, has how he's played this year and how the development has gone changed what you think he can be as a player?
I was watching that summer league game back for the story and watching his shot attempts in particular. And the biggest thing that stood out to me is obviously, like, they tell me we're working on the base. When I talk to the trainer, you could see the change in it when Sarr like lines up for shot now. Like in summer league, his feet were kind of all over the place. He didn't look sturdy, and now every time it looks more repeatable. It looks a lot smoother. So you are seeing some level of improvement. I think he is. I don't like the shooting is going to be something that needs to come around. And I do think they expect it to come around sooner rather than later. I don't sense a lot of concern from the Wizards about that. For him, it's about continuing his defensive engagement and activity. He's been good there. I think he can probably be a little bit better than he even has so far. He's incredibly versatile on that side of things, which really helps. He needs to improve as a rebounder. He needs to improve his hands down low. There's a lot of times you'll see passes bounce off his hands or rebounds bounce off his hands, and that's just something that he needs to clean up. But you can't when he gets in the open court and he grabs a rebound and goes, like it is a sight to see because that is a fluid athlete who's able to read the court really well, and his playmaking has been maybe one of the biggest unexpected surprises about his game because you put him in the short roll, he's finding open passers, he's making advanced reads, you put him in the fast break situation, he's hitting cutters, he's operating from the high post, he's doing a lot of pretty advanced stuff for a guy his age.
So what I'm hearing is let's get him in the summer out. Part of his jump season this year, we're going to get him to Commanders training camp. We're going to get him on the jugs machine.
I said it. Yep,
yeah,
100%.
Let's just go. I don't know if they make a jugs machine for basketballs, but I think the footballs will help his hand-eye coordination. They get nice and soft. Get him out there with Scary Terry. Terry can help anyone. That's my thought.
You know how with like RG3 and Jaden Daniels, they kept telling him to go to
the National Park to
slide. Same thing here.
Yeah, exactly. A little cross-sport training. Never hurt anybody. Actually, it might have, but we don't need to talk about that. So when you look at, like, I guess the last thing I'll ask you about Sarr specifically is in terms of the ceiling, right? Every draft class, I think in NBA history, if I have this stat right, but if not, it's like the last 25 years or whatever, modern, whatever you want to call it, has had an all-star. That no matter how good or bad the draft class is, there's always at least one every single year that turns into like a multi-time all-star. Do we think that Alex Sarr can get there? Because there's this thought that like maybe this is the class that doesn't, and like Sarr might turn into a really good defensive player, but he's never going to score enough to get to be an all-star. Is he a guy that you think can make in his career? Like when you look at the trajectory, you look at what he's doing now, you get to know the person behind him a little bit in the course of this piece. Like, is that on the table for him, do you think?
I don't think he's shown me anything yet that makes me say definitively yes, he will be an all-star, or even likely yes, he will be an all-star. But nothing that I've learned about him so far makes me rule it out for the future, because he has improved so much over the short span of time. He's going to continue improving it, and at the bare minimum, he has the athletic baseline to make that a potential outcome for him.
All right. As for the other guys in this draft class for the Wizards, Bub Carrington, we'll start with him, and then we'll wrap with Keyshawn George as we kind of halfway check in on the Wiz here at the All-Star break. Of course, Sarr and Carrington and Bilal all competing in the Rising Stars Challenge tonight. If their teams win, they will be a part of the new All-Star format on Sunday. For Bub, though, the second of the 3 first-rounders this year, is that a really interesting year, I think, because you see some flashes, but you also, I think, just the youth of Bub Carrington tends to jump out a lot. What have you seen from him in terms of, again, where he started beginning of the season and where he is now in terms of the growth? He's also had a very in flux role around with the other injuries at that guard spot this year.
Yeah, Bub has been pretty impressive, all things considered, based on the tough situation he's been put in. I think he started the season at just 18 years old. He turned 19 during the season, and he's set to play point guard a lot of the time. He's organizing the offense for the Wizards, and it's something where I think he stood out in that way. This is someone who was a son of a coach, great basketball mind, I think, and I think that's already starting to show up. He has been a very impressive movement shooter. You see him doing a lot of stuff off the dribble, coming around screens, relocating, and he's started to be pretty good from 3, I'm pretty sure, if you look at the pull-up numbers. Biggest question for him is how good of a defender can he turn into? I think he has the tools and he has the makeup to do so, but it's a question of actually like bringing those two things together and becoming actually good at it. And then the second part of it is, does he ever become good enough at getting to the rim to up that upside a little bit more? Because right now he is a pretty perimeter-oriented player. He didn't get to the rim a lot in college. Some of that, he and his family talk about that being a byproduct of him having a late growth spurt, so he just hasn't had to do it yet much. But we'll see. I mean, that's one of the biggest questions. Can he get to the rim on a consistent basis?
Yeah, and you have to wonder how much that changes over the next couple of years as he gets his grown man body, because he's still basically a child. I don't say that pejoratively. I say that like he just turned 19 years old. He very much will be adding weight naturally. Nevertheless, the work that he does in an NBA weight room, specifically that NBA weight room, we saw how Bilal has added some bulk over his year and a half now with the Wizards. Varun Shankar with us from the Washington Post. Of course, they're Wizards beat reporter. The new feature on Alex Sarr is available now at WashingtonPost.com/sports. And then last rookie that we should talk about here, Keyshawn George, I think has been just an absolute revelation. Guys taken in the 20s are they're typically not good, period. Nevertheless, good immediately. So what have you seen? Like, and I'm going to ask this question this way because, like, oh my God, he's contributing. We're happy, but like, okay, he's still a rookie. He can still grow. He's still really young. So the same exact question, if we take away his draft status, from what we saw at the beginning of the year from Keyshawn George to what we see now and what we think he can grow into, like, how much has that changed for you and what you see from him?
He came into the league, I feel like his reputation was this is a shooter, right? He shot 40% on threes at Miami, and that seemed like his role. He was big, 3-and-D, prototypical. I've been really surprised at how good of a connector and facilitator he is. He's a very good passer, very smart passer. They've been putting him more on-ball situations as the years gone on. I think that's something where they're trying to expand his role and see what he's doing. I mean, listen, the Wizards are still trying to learn about their young players at this point. We've only got 50-something games of data. They haven't played, obviously, every single one. Maybe Bub has, actually. But generally speaking, like, you've got a limited sample size to work off of. They're still trying to learn what's the deal with these players. So the on-ball stuff has been a little bit more impressive as you've gone along, and the shooting is starting to come around. He started the season really badly, which was a little bit unexpected because of what he came into the league as, but it started to come around. You're starting to see the rest of the pieces come together. The biggest question for me with Keyshawn is he does a lot well right now. He is a pretty good passer. He's a pretty good, shooter. He can get to the rim a little bit. He can finish okay around there. He is a multi-positional defender. Does any of those things go from acceptable, slightly above average to good, great, premier? Like, that's really where he's a jack of all trades. Does he start boosting what those trades are a little bit more?
That's a great call. And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out with Keyshawn is to go full circle here back to the story that the anecdote, I should say, that you have about Sarr in the Summer League game. Keyshawn's got some of that too, because he's had some nasty shooting stretches this year. And like it takes real gumption to go like 0 of 11 or 2 of 12 from 3 in a game to just keep shooting. And he's got a couple of those. And in the short term, like obviously that's less than ideal. You want those shots to go in. But in the long term, the fact that he just keeps shooting and he and Sarr and Bub are all kind of really taking to this just keep shooting, just keep playing, keep it moving forward mentality, I think is a really exciting thing for the Wizards. Of course, they need an influx of talent. That'll come hopefully in this draft lottery. But that's something we'll worry about in May. For right now, we'll enjoy them in the All-Star festivities this weekend. Varun Shankar, the piece is available now, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Really great read on Alex Sarr. Hey, man, enjoy your All-Star break. I don't know if you get a break, but enjoy the break if you do. Excellent.
I'm very excited about it.
I bet. Your first season on the beat. Those NBA beat jobs. Man, as a guy who used to be on the NFL beat, I was like, this is hard. I can't imagine an NBA beat. 82 of these things? Man, 16 back then. I didn't have to worry about a 17-game schedule. I was soft. That's why I sit in a chair and give opinions now.
I'm enjoying my rent now. That's why I say I get to stay home for like 2 or so weeks. It's been a brutal road schedule, so I get to enjoy my rent. Oh my God, my apartment does look like this. Wow.
Yeah, you enjoy the inside. It's going to be cold. There's no reason to go outside. Varun Shankar, everybody. Back with more Hoffman Show next.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.